I was working for a global ceiling tile manufacturer, supporting their technology group as Lean Champion. One of the groups within technology was Global Quality Assurance. Now, Global Quality Assurance was responsible to verify, assure, and certify the quality of products made by all of the manufacturing facilities around the world. The way they did that was they had each facility send products to them on a monthly basis so that they could test them in our testing facility, which we call the pilot plant, and then check the visuals and the properties of all those tiles to assure that the customer was getting what they needed. The way they tested the visual was in the pilot plant in an area that was adjacent to a big outer window. And what they had was a 12-foot by 24-foot grid framework about 8 feet above the ground that people could put tiles in and see how the light looked as it went across the face of those tiles. And it seemed like a great idea, and that worked for many years. The problem was the weather had to cooperate. So as you might expect, if you had a cloudy day, you weren't going to find out how sunlight looked as it went across the tiles. And you wouldn't be able to expose glossy areas or patchy areas on those tile faces. So that was working, like I said, for a while, but the problem was we as a company were about to introduce a ton of new products. And as we were developing them, we needed to test the quality of them and see how the light looked across the faces of them. So this process was going to take way too long given our existing system. So the director of quality and I chartered a Kaizen event to try to solve the problem of how do we increase capacity and reduce quality assurance testing time given the systems and facilities that we had. So we assembled a team of the best and brightest scientists, technicians, and engineers, and we picked an area that was an interior space. We knew that just modifying the existing space wasn't going to do what we needed because we could never count on the sun to be out, especially during the winter months. So we said, okay, we're going to have to replicate what we need. We'll have to use lighting that we bring in. So we identified two 20-foot by 50-foot spots in this pilot plant. They were all both interior spaces, and in those spaces were years of equipment, materials, and supplies that essentially most people weren't using. So on the first day of the Kaizen, after teaching the team lean principles and concepts around 5S and other things, visual management and such, we went out into the space and we assessed everything we had there, knowing that we had to clear out that space entirely. So the team spent many hours going through every piece of equipment, supplies, raw materials, etc., disposing of anything that they knew wasn't going to be used, and then relocating and removing everything else. Now we had an empty space. What were we going to do with it? Well, the team next determined on day 2 that what they wanted to do was create testing pods, they called them. These 12-foot by 12-foot grid structures that would allow teams to put ceiling tiles into these structures and allow them above their heads see the impact of lighting across them. Now we hadn't identified lighting yet, but we knew we would have to have the ability to see the tiles above our heads. Now in the middle of day 2, the weather was clear, the sun was out, and we were able to go out to the existing testing area and measure not only the intensity of the light, but the actual angle of lighting we would need to replicate in these new pods, of which there were 6. So now the team knew what it needed. Now somebody had to go to the store. It turned out it was me, and they gave me a list of different types of lights to bring back with me. After a couple hours of shopping, the team was building all of the pods with grid structure and making sure everything was square and proper. I brought back about 6 different types of lights. Next, 2 of our team members went up on the scaffold with the lights and tested all different types of lighting. The good news is one type of lighting that I brought back actually fit the bill. They were able to get the intensity they wanted, and they were able to get the angle they wanted in the space that they had available. Now that we knew what that was, they sent me to the store again to get multiple lights to replicate the one that we had identified. While I was doing that, they were wiring everything so that we could hang the lights at the proper space, at the proper height, and at the proper angle. Through the rest of the session, they created 6 pods, but one of them with the lighting, and what they realized was they actually were able to create a second light at the 90-degree angle to give them a second way to assess the impact of lighting across the tiles, which they never had in the existing space. So now they had an even better way to assess quality. Now this was great. They knew they had a pod that was working. They had a concept that they could replicate in the 5 other pods after the Kaizen was over, but now they needed a managing system. They had to have a system that was going to allow people to sign up for and use the pods and be accountable to finish their work so that others could use those pods. So they created a nice whiteboard, and they got an area owner to be the administrator and hold us accountable to properly use and then finish work so that the next person could do their work. Once the week was over, we had a solution and a managing system that reduced the weeks of effort down to mere minutes. And all it turned out was the team needed to shine a light on their problem in order to solve it. I hope this story provided you with some inspiration to revisit your own processes. I have a lot more I'd like to share. Head over to pi-partners.com to learn how I can help. And check back from time to time for more Kaizen stories.